Got my coffee. Got my espresso. I've got my Nespresso espresso. Good morning, everybody. I know. Did I just say good morning, anybody? Good morning, everybody. Nice to have you on here. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominations every single year is a bittersweet thing because no one, and get this, you know this, no one looks at this list and doesn't get pissed off every year. It happens every year. It will happen till the end of time. If we're still around in a few years, the world's going crazy lately. Um, but there's always someone you're going, what? No Grand Funk Railroad again this year? You know, and there's no Steve Winwood, no Toto. Look, the Nazareth. I've got a list here of people who Thin Lizzy, Supertramp. Where are these people on the list? I'm just waiting for some people to get on because every single year we do this. I have the term is bittersweet. Every year when this comes out, I remember I was ready. Shannon, my wife, was ready to have an ultrasound maybe 3-4 years ago, and she wanted to go in, and in this case, it wasn't a life threatening thing, and she just looked at me. She says, "No, no, no, you do the list." Oh God, I'm not gonna sneeze. Don't sneeze. Don't sneeze. I have sneezing fits. Yeah, I have sneezing fits that last for it's a ridiculous amount of time. Let me just put the heater on. Hear that? Anyway, I will before I start having a sneezing fit. This year's nominations, please, heater, come on. Oh, sorry about this. About twice a month, I'll have a really bad sneezing fit, and it's not good when you're going on live. Anyway, hi everybody. Rock and roll nominations this year: Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey. I know people. Don't sneeze. I'll sneeze 75 times and lose my voice. This is the first time it's happened when I've been on live. Okay, again, the nominations for this year, the class of 2025. Bad Company. A lot of people are going to be very happy, rather, glad that Bad Company were nominated. They were one of the most, I mean, they were free going into Bad Company. One of the most influential bands. Whether you look at them, they've had hits. Obviously, they had quite a few hits. But when you look at their contributions to rock and roll, it's immense. Paul Rogers, very happy. He gave a statement today, basically saying thank you. The Black Crowes, heavily influential band. I remember people used to call them the American version of the Rolling Stones. Mariah Carey, you lost me. But Mariah Carey is a huge artist. I know a lot of people on here are going to go crazy saying, what is Mariah Carey doing on here? We're well past the point in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where you can say, what's going on? This is crazy. I don't understand this. But we're beyond that. Hold on. I got to get a tissue because it's a sneezing fit. That did not happen, by the way, which is good. But I have to take care of business. Just give me a second. So happy it didn't happen. And let's continue. Okay. Sorry about that. Very unprofessional. But, so Mariah Carey is one of those artists that every single year will get an artist that doesn't fit rock and roll, and everyone jumps on that. And I can understand that. I know why. When I think of rock and roll, I don't think of Mariah Carey, but when Casey Kasem used to do the top 40, he used to say the rock and roll era, the best, had more hits in the rock and roll era, and he'd mention someone who's not rock and roll. So that was hard on me back in the day. Chubby Checker, still alive, by the way. Let's do the twist. Let's twist again. Joe Cocker, always, again, one of the most influential people in rock and roll. Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I mean, that was a circus, huh? But when you look at Joe Cocker as being a guy who, with help from my friend, who did a Beatles song better than the Beatles, mind you, it was a Ringo song, but Ringo's the man. So one of the few people, I mean, there have been many people when you look at it that did Beatles songs better than the Beatles. And Billy Idol's in there. Of course, more of an 80s as far as people getting to know him, an 80s artist. I was just listening to Eyes Without a Face last night. I was telling Shannon, my wife, I said, I remember the first time I played that on the radio. I remember no one warned me that he came up with this song, which I loved. I remember going, wow, this is not Rebel Yell, but Joy Division, New Order, Cyndi Lauper. When you talk about influence, she influenced a lot of female singers. That first album, She's So Unusual, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Thank you very much. I'm going to get to. Let me open the app so I can see who's on here. Thank God I didn't sneeze. Anybody else have this problem? Before we go on, we're just waiting for people to go on. I have a severe problem with sneezing fits. S. Kowalchuk, thank you for a super chat. It's much appreciated because before I go on, a lot of people are quitting YouTube because the world is going so insane, and every single day, and we don't talk politics on this channel, but every single day there's a political thing that happens that's just a what the hell? And so people are going into those kind of videos a lot more than they're going into music. I mean, when you look at Maslow's triangle, where it's basically, food and shelter and the basic things that you need to survive, people are more interested in that. And they are maybe on looking at, and we're working on this right now, the history of Neil Diamond. They're more interested in, what's going to happen politically. And I can understand that. We're not going to talk about politics, but I understand. Mana is a Mexican band that I'm not familiar with whatsoever. I'm going to have to look them up. They're nominated. Oasis, who, of course, it's timely because of the tour, that the brothers have finally gotten back together. Outkast. I think Outkast was a heavily influential band. I was just listening to Hey Ya yesterday. Fish. Well-deserved. Soundgarden. Well-deserved. And the White Stripes. A lot of people have been balking at the fact that the White Stripes haven't been nominated for... And again, you might not like the White Stripes, but heavily influential. Let me look in my little tickle trunk here to do a Mr. Dress Up. Here are the people not nominated for a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Hold on. There we go. Who are asking today, where's America? Where's Greg Allman? This is from Ultimate Classic Rock, and I love that website. I can't say that enough. I go and get a lot of my information on, and they've got a great app. If news breaks, they'll let you know, and they've saved my neck quite a few times. They've used some of our stories quite a few times on this. Bands that are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If this is not updated, let me know. I am suffering. Ever since I turned 65 a few days ago, it's almost like all hell breaks loose. America, Greg Allman, Alice in Chains, the people not in. Bryan Adams, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Badfinger, Toto, Blind Faith, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Blue Oyster Cult, not in? Man. Grand Funk. Even with two great albums, I still think Boston should get in with the debut and Don't Look Back. Again, so incredibly influential, not only in sales. I mean, for a long time, Boston's debut was the biggest selling debut of all time. Phil Collins, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, the Spencer Davis Group. Can you believe the Spencer Davis Group's not in? Emerson, Lake, and Palmer? Carl Palmer's the only one around. That's another whole subject where I know they shouldn't be rushed to put someone in because they're necessarily dying, but I want them to, because look at in Bachman Turner Overdrive, Blair Thornton's still alive, the rhythm guitarist, lead guitarist at times of Bachman Turner Overdrive. C.F. Turner, Fred Turner's still around, but the other Bachman boys are all dead. Randy Bachman's still around, but it would be nice to have Bachman Turner Overdrive in there. They certainly deserve it. Who else? When you read this list, it's just... Oh, hi Charles. My brother's on there. Kansas, Boston, King Crimson, Huey Lewis and the News, Manfred Mann, Earth Band, Megadeth, Molly Hatchet, The Monkees, Motley Crue, Motorhead. Why is it Motorhead? I didn't even like Motorhead, but Motorhead should be in there. Mott the Hoople, Nazareth, New York Dolls with, Mr. Johansson not doing very well these days. Harry Nilsson, Poison, Iggy Pop, Procol Harum, REO Speedwagon, Scorpions, Sonic Youth, that were on there. Nope. Jerry Rafferty, Steelers Wheel with Jerry Rafferty. Sting, Styx, Supertramp, 10 Years After, Thin Lizzy, Three Dog Night, again Toto, UFO. Uriah Heep should be on there. Steve Winwood, Warren Zevon. If I'm missing some that have already been in, I don't think so. It's a sad state of affairs when you look at the people who should be in over people like Mariah Carey, but the rules have been set years ago. But I still balk at the rules of going, yeah, I know that Mariah Carey's not a rock and roll artist, but still, this is crazy. Why isn't Kansas in? Why isn't Styx in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Thin Lizzy. UFO, as far as hard rock, heavily influential. So the people who did get in, and I should mention this, is Bad Company. Again, one of the greatest, most influential bands of all time. Paul Rogers, easily one of the greatest singers that ever lived. And I've said this story before. I remember seeing a Canadian artist, Alfie Zappacosta, in Vancouver. I lived in Calgary at the time. I'm still in Calgary. And I introduced Alfie on stage. If you don't know Alfie Zappacosta, it's spelled just the way it sounds. Look him up. He's an amazing artist. If you're an American, excuse me, sorry, I was sneezing. You got to look this guy up. Anyway, I was seeing Alfie Zappacosta in Calgary, here where I live, and he asked me to introduce him on stage. I introduced him on stage. And then he said, I said, I'm going to Vancouver next week because I also worked for a station in Vancouver, which I'd worked for since 1990. And Alfie said, well, I'm in Vancouver next week when you're there. And it turned out we were going to be there at the same time. He was doing a show. He said, hey, John, you want to introduce me in it? I think it was Gastown, the old Gastown. He said, why don't you introduce me there? Because you're working for a popular station there. So fine. I'm telling this story for a reason. So we sit down. He gives us really good seats in the front row. And we're at a little table. And halfway through the show, I look over. And there's this man. He's got this look about him. Not the biggest guy, but he's big. And I turned to Shannon, my wife, and I said, that guy looks like Paul Rogers. And I said, well, I think he lives, at the time, I think he lived in the Lower Mainland, in the Vancouver area. And when I left, I didn't get a chance to meet him. I saw Alfie put a picture up. He said, here, Paul Rogers showed up for my show. Amazing. Anyway, Bad Company. That is the greatest news that I could see this morning. Even though there's a lot of stuff on here. I mean, Chubby Checker should be in here. Talk about influential people in the history of rock and roll. Let me just get back to some of your comments. Not a lot of people commenting this morning. And a lot of people are commenting. Okay. Grimmer Twins says, hold on. All media views podcast home most nondescript list of any rock and roll class. Yeah. A lot of people are saying that a lot this is probably the most disappointing list, with the exception of some people. I have to say Chubby Checker should be in there. I mean, he is, as far as influence, and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame looks at that. Joe Cocker, of course. Bad Company, of course. Black Crowes, yes, but there's a lot of people who should have been in there before the Black Crowes. Mariah Carey, again, it's the argument about you're not rock and roll. Joe Cocker, of course. Billy Idol, newer artist. I remember playing his early stuff in the 80s when I got into radio. Joy Division, New Order, of course. Cyndi Lauper, heavily influential, but there's still, to me, a lot of people who could have been in before Cyndi. But I'm not going to balk at Cyndi Lauper. She influenced so many female artists, and everyone stopped and looked at, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, the whole girl, She's So Unusual thing. Mana, or I think it's Mana, a Mexican band. I'm not familiar with them. Oasis. Don't ask George Harrison. George's not around anymore, but George Harrison. Some of the Beatles did not like Oasis because of their self-proclaimed, at times, worship of for themselves of being the next big thing to the Beatles or some semblance of that. Don't quote me. Outkast, heavily influential, not rock and roll, but really influential. Fish, of course. Soundgarden, of course. The White Stripes, yes, but it's still as all media all media reviews podcast. That is a long title for a web, but good for you. I'll check out your stuff, by the way. Grimmer Twins said, yes, Split Ends, the Chills, the Clean. I don't know who that is. No, Kiwi Bands, that's why. TJ, hello. Hi, TJ. Patrick, Mariah Carey, that just hurts. Grimmer Twin. Okay, Oasis, Stone Roses, Grimmer Twins, Primal Scream, New Order, Black Grape. You know, a lot of those bands, every year you're going to get bands that, the Joe Lunchbucket, let's go there. Joe Lunchbucket and Evelyn Everybody will look at every single year some of these people and go, what the hell? Who are these? And I always go back to Joe Lunchbucket and Evelyn Everybody. Feel free to use that term because I got that from a radio consultant and or Neil Gallagher, who was a great program director of mine. Neil was a quirky guy, but I loved him. He was very good to me. And he was my program director at QMFM in Vancouver, a big radio station that existed there from 1990 until a few years ago. Now they're Move 103, and I was just let go from them in May of last year. But great gig. I love them. They were really good to me. But Neil used to always call, I think it was Neil, Joe Lunchbucket, Evelyn Everybody. What are they thinking? And when you look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, who are people who are dig a lot deeper beyond looking at the liner notes in the back of an album, these are people who are, of course, true fans, but they have their own agendas. And I'm not completely sure what the agenda is, but obviously they opened it up wide. The biggest thing for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there's a lot of artists on there. They'll look at influential artists, and they look at rock and roll as being everything. I mean, when you think about the history of music, don't get me started, but rock and roll came from black music, and everyone knows that. Whether you like it or not, it just did. So when they put in a Whitney Houston, for instance, I'm going, no, I want to go way back, but Joe Lunchbucket and Evelyn Everybody don't know those people. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in some ways will always have artists in there that will appease Joe Lunchbucket and Evelyn Everybody. You have to have that. It is a ceremony. They want people to watch it. They can't just have people from the 60s in there that are going to die and put them on the ballot. They can't just do that. It's just the way it goes. So you always get those nominations. Just quickly, if you just joined us, and we're getting more people on the stream, the nominations this year are, because I need to always circle back to that because that's what we're talking about. Bad Company is the biggest thing in this list that I am so happy about, personally. But Chubby Checker, of course, when you look at influence in the early rock and roll, no one who lived in that era doesn't know the twist. When you look at influential songs that basically indelibly stamped other artists to sort of think that way. Rock and roll, rock and roll, rock and roll. And that was literally rock and roll. Not rock, but rock and roll. So Bad Company, The Black Crowes, this is the nominations this year. Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Joe, We're Not Worthy, and Joe's not around anymore. Billy Idol, Joy Division, New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Amana or Mana, I think it's pronounced, Mexican band, Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. I think a lot of those people deserve to be there. It's just a problem with all the people who should be there before them, who actually deserve a nomination. And here's some people who kind of should be there that are not there. I have a doctor's appointment with my father-in-law in about half an hour I've got to go to. Here's the people, like, whether you like America or not, you know, Dewey Bunnell, Jerry Beckley, and Dan Peake. Dan left in, I think, 77. Rock and roll was a little hard on him. I talked to Dan a few years ago. I talked to Jerry Beckley, who doesn't tour with America anymore, but it's just Dewey Bunnell and a band now, and they're calling themselves America still. There's no way America does not belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's no universe, whether you like them or not. because I know a lot of my friends in high school, I would have Homecoming and Hearts and all those H albums. When they stopped calling their albums H, the first one was after Dan left, and it was called Silent Letter, and H is the silent letter. But that was a great album, by the way. Silent Letter is a great album. Get that. America should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't know why. Here's some other people who should be in: Greg Allman, Alice in Chains, Bryan Adams, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Badfinger, Toto, Blind Faith. Oh God, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Blue Oyster Cult. Come on. Grand Funk, Boston, Phil Collins, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Emerson, Lake and Palmer's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How? I wasn't the biggest fan, and I've talked to Carl Palmer. He's the only one left. Carl was a little kind of he just got off a tour. He didn't suffer fools, and even I can ask some silly questions. It was not a tough interview, but he was tired, I could tell. But I love Carl Palmer. He's one of the most influential drummers in my life. Phil Collins, I mentioned him. Brian Eno, of course. Not just his solo stuff, but Gabriel and so many other things. The James Gang, Jethro Tull, Kansas, Boston, King Crimson, Huey Lewis and the News. Whether you like them or not, they should be there. Living Color, Manfred Mann's Earth Band, Megadeth, Molly Hatchet, Monkees, Motley Crue, Motorhead, Mott the Hoople, Nazareth. Nazareth should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mind you, Pete Agnew's the only guy left. New York Dolls. Yes, as I mentioned before, the Honorable Mr. Johansson is not doing well. It would be nice if they would have been nominated, but I don't think he'd even be... David Johansen couldn't probably go to the ceremony. Harry Nilsson, Poison, Iggy Pop, Procol Harum. REO Speedwagon should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, whether you like them or not. I always have to preface everything by saying them. Jerry Rafferty / Steelers Wheel. Sting, Styx, Supertramp, 10 Years After, Thin Lizzy. Thin Lizzy? Come on. Three Dog Night, Toto, UFO. UFO, heavily influenced for hard rockers. Uriah Heep, Steve Winwood, Warren Zevon. People who should be in. And before I leave, I will tell you, we're getting more people now because people are waking up around the world. Not only waking up to the nomination, but literally waking up. But I've got to drive my father-in-law to a doctor's appointment here in a second. So the nominations and the biggest news and the saving grace in this year's list is Bad Company. I mean, this is I couldn't be happier with Bad Company being on there. And I only had maybe, ask me tomorrow, I'll say two, I think 3 Bad Company albums in my life. Sorry I have to sniff because I almost sneezed 40 times today, but I was able to fend it off with my little heater here. So Bad Company being nominated, and Paul Rogers made a statement, and he was very happy, and he says, at last they never gave up. I'm heavily paraphrasing him. The Black Crowes are nominated. Again, they deserve it, but I can imagine other people. And let's look at it. They're looking at different eras, too. They're probably going to look at some people from the 50s and the 60s and even before, and make sure they balance it out. The problem with doing that is you don't have the Uriah Heeps in there, or Steve Winwood, or Warren Zevon, or, Thin Lizzy, Nazareth, even Boston. Even though they only had 2 big albums, Third Stage was a big album, but I don't think it necessarily, I was going to say influenced a lot of people. Of course it did. But those first 2 albums, when you compare it to the Third Stage, to Don't Look Back, and the self-titled debut, don't tell me that it influenced a lot of people. It doesn't matter. They only had 2 huge, heavily influential albums like the first 2. Boston should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. REO Speedwagon should be there. Toto should be there. I know Toto and Toto's influence and playing on different people's albums, most notably Michael Jackson. But when I was talking to Fee Waybill, we went on and on for the Tubes. We went on and on about Steve Lukather, Toto's guitarist, influence on Talk to You Later, and She's a Beauty. Dun, 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 that he just came up with this kind of stuff, those riffs. So at the very least, Jeff Porcaro should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I know I say this every year, but come on. If Neil Giraldo, Pat Benatar's husband. Neil, you're a talented guy. But again, why isn't Elton John's band in over Neil Giraldo, who is and don't tell me he wrote a lot of hits. He wrote a few, but that's so undivided. I know there's, and I can't prove this, but the rumor is Pat Benatar says, I don't want to be in unless you nominate my husband, who started saying it's Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo a few years ago. I applaud her for asking her husband to make sure that her husband gets his due, and he produced some stuff. But if the Elton John band or Billy Joel's band's not in there before Neil Giraldo, hello, don't get me started on that. I mean, and I have nothing against Neil. It's just what's going on here. So I digress. I want to be on here before. So again, I have to circle back. I've been a broadcaster for 41 years. One of the things we have to do is saying, if you just joined us, I'm retired on radio now after 41 years. Bad Company, again, one of the greatest decisions they ever make. It doesn't save the list, but it makes me feel really, really good. Thank you, Paul Rogers. And we're so lucky we still have Paul Rogers around. One of the greatest singers in rock history. And I hope this is the catalyst for me finally getting a Paul Rogers interview. I would love to talk to the man. Black Crowes deserve. Other people should be ahead of them. That was Freudian. Hope the brothers get along. Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, well-deserved. Joe Cocker, again, well-deserved. But Joe's dead. Excuse me. Billy Idol, Joy Division, New Order. Cyndi Lauper is nominated again. Mana, or I'm always having to correct myself. I think it's Mana, Mexican band. Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and rounding off the nominations this year, the White Stripes. I never look at I never look at the I've never seen the ceremony in full ever. Never have. A few years ago, I talked to Randy Meisner, and he said it's kind of nice that they got us in there because all the Eagles, or the important Eagles, were there for the picture. It was really, really nice. Let me look at some of the. I'll start from the bottom. Rhymer Twins says Eminem. A lot of people asking questions. All Media Reviews podcast. That is a long title. Podcast. Toto is politics. Well, yes and no. There are people who said bad things about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who got in. I thought when Ian Anderson told me that he doesn't care, and Ian Anderson, for the people who don't know, is the leader of Jethro Tull, the lead singer, lead songwriter. He just said, I don't care. It's just kind of a TV show. He didn't really care. And I thought, oh, that's not going to help you. But there are people who said bad things and got nominated and got in. But yeah, Toto, maybe politics. In Excess should definitely be in. Iggy Pop, of course. Grimer Twin, you're the biggest contributor today. Yeah, Renee says Three Dog Night. The fact that Three Dog Night, even though they didn't write their hits, Three Dog Night should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When you look at, after the Beatles, Three Dog Night, Grand Funk, Creedence Clearwater Revival, the biggest bands in rock after the Beatles left, in 1970. You look at who was influenced. Grand Funk outsold Shea Stadium. It was a different system. Faster than the Beatles. Look at the string of hits that Creedence Clearwater Revival had when John Fogerty was ahead of that band. It was insane. But yeah, not there. So anyway, guys, I got to leave because I have a doctor's appointment, not mine. Even though, like I said a while ago, ever since I turned 65, February 1st, it's almost like the universe has given permission for all hell to break loose. I'm okay, but I've got artery buildup stuff, minor. I've got ocular migraines and got knee problem. Going, what the hell's going on? Some of this I had before I was turned 65, but all of a sudden I'm taking a hearing test. The hearing is okay, but it's all this stuff, And whenever the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame comes up, the nominations, I look at this and I'm going, do I feel old? Anyone else feeling old? I know the answer to that. I got to get off my butt. That's the thing about working at home with your MacBook. And there's another thing, my MacBook's falling apart. So every time someone gives us a donation, and you can make a donation on PayPal in the description of this video. Especially now, a few years ago, this same MacBook was dying, and we were able to change some of the innards, and you know what I mean by that, through donations, and thank you very much. Now we literally need a new MacBook because it's too slow. This MacBook's like, I think, 7 years old. So anyone want to make a donation to Rock History Music, help us buy a new MacBook? That would be really nice. So thanks a lot for joining us. That's the nomination. It's not perfect, but Bad Company and Joe Cocker make me happy. Mariah Carey, I don't know. She'll probably get in this year. So thanks everyone for joining. Keep listening to the music you're listening to. I know the world seems like it's on fire right now, but you always have your music in the confines of the four walls of your house. When you listen to the music that makes a difference, even if it's on Spotify. If you have the vinyl, good for you. I've got the vinyl. I've got the CDs. But listen to some music that makes you feel good. Do we need permission from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to decide who's the greatest in rock and roll? You know the answer to that. So keep listening to your music. And thanks for supporting the channel. If you want to, all the links are in the description of this video. And right now, since we're dealing with an awful lot of stuff, go back and listen to our old videos. The income would be nice. We could use it because YouTube is a crazy beast. Take care of yourself. I'm John Bowden. This is being broadcast on our Facebook channels right now, on Rock History Music and Rock History Book. Rock History Book is more our looking at the past of rock and roll. Check out the channel. Take care of yourself. Bye.